A Mortal's Journey to Immortality episode 139. Han Li never expected they would encounter the once-a-century eruption of Zhu Lingqi. It was this eruption that sealed their magic power and sent them plummeting into the Land of Illumination. Previously, when Han Li fell into the Land of Illumination, a female cultivator clung to him. She inquired about his origins. Just as Han Li was about to deceive her, the sound of chaotic footsteps came unexpectedly from afar. Torches made of tree roots appeared, and shadowy figures flickered beneath the firelight. Seeing this, Han Li's heart stirred. There were actually other people there. They didn't seem to be the other cultivators who were swallowed by the ghostly house with him. The people quickly crossed most of the distance and were approaching. Han Li finally saw the shadowy figures clearly. They were 4 or 5 unusually tall men, a head taller than him. All were men in their prime. They wore green clothes and carried whitish, sword-like weapons in one hand. Large vertical leather bags were strapped to their backs. They rushed towards Han Li with large strides. Han Li was surprised and secretly guessed their origins. The female cultivator also saw them and trembled slightly, appearing somewhat uneasy. Han Li slightly moved a few of his fingers. It seemed he had regained a bit of strength. His body was quickly returning to normal. By the light of the torches, he noticed a white expanse nearby. Piles of fish and shrimp covered the ground. He and the female cultivator happened to be on top of a relatively high pile. Further away, everything was still pitch black. The place was very spacious. He couldn't see any walls. The men stopped about 20 or 30 zhang away from Han Li. One stood watch, vigilantly surveying the surroundings, while the others frantically stuffed the fish and shrimp into their leather bags. Han Li found this a bit strange. A cry came from the distance. The man on watch suddenly roared at the others, "Not good. Retreat. Quickly retreat. Fire spirit beasts are coming." The men who were gathering fish and shrimp immediately shouldered their bags and fled in another direction. On the ground, only 2 flickering torches remained, stuck in the ground. Several hisses came from the darkness in the distance. It seemed something had discovered the fleeing men. The rapid thudding of heavy objects hitting the ground came closer. Several crimson figures, several zhang long, shot out from the darkness. After a flash, they disappeared. Han Li discovered these so-called fire spirit beasts were actually ferocious monsters with exposed red scales. Calmness returned. Han Li breathed a sigh of relief. The monsters hadn't noticed him. It was a stroke of luck. Han Li held the female cultivator in his arms and slowly stood up. With his body back to normal, he could finally move freely. The female cultivator in his arms said softly, somewhat shyly, "Why, you can put me down. I'm almost recovered." Han Li looked at her and said indifferently, "Aren't you afraid of getting covered in fish guts?" "I don't really mind, though." The female cultivator didn't say anything else. Han Li carried her to the 2 torches, pulled one out of the ground, and looked around. The female cultivator wanted to walk on her own, so Han Li put her down. After straightening her clothes a little, she picked up the other torch. Han Li walked in the direction the men had come from. The female cultivator hurried to catch up and followed behind him. There were no more fish or shrimp on the ground. Their feet now trod upon soft, black sand. Han Li saw the footprints left by the men. He followed the footprints. He saw an exit glowing with blue light. As soon as Han Li stepped out, 7 or 8 jade white swords were placed against his neck. More than 20 young men and women surrounded him. A cold voice rang out. "Who are you? Where are Ahu and the others? Could you be newcomers from outside?" These people wore the same strange green clothes as the previous group of men. They stared at Han Li with various expressions. The one who questioned Han Li was a thin, middle-aged man. The female cultivator was surrounded by several others, unable to move. Han Li forced a wry smile. "I think," he said, "we're probably the newcomers you mentioned. Do outsiders often enter this place?" The middle-aged man's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained cold. "Even if you hadn't said it," he said, "I would have guessed. With your strange attire, only those from the outside would dress like this. Consider yourselves lucky to have encountered us. After all, most outsiders become food for the Een beasts before they even figure out what this place is." He waved his hand, and the men and women sheathed their swords. Hanli looked around. They were standing in front of a small stone hill. The blue glowing entrance behind them led into the hill's belly. In the distance stretched a boundless, dark yellow desert. The sky was a heavy, oppressive black, filled with inky black clouds. Within the clouds, several dark blue lightning bolts continuously jumped and flashed, illuminating the area in a pale blue light, giving it an eerie appearance. The thin man asked Hanli if he had seen anyone else. Hanli explained that those people had been chased by fire spirit beasts and had run off in another direction. The thin man sighed in relief. He believed Ahu's group could handle the fire spirit beasts and had sent family and others to meet them. Then, the thin man told Hanli and the female cultivator that they had encountered a once-a-century eruption of Zhu Lingqi. Therefore, the spatial rift was much larger than usual, and those caught in it couldn't escape. However, because of this, most of the Een beasts that usually resided within the hill's belly had left the area. Otherwise, Hanli and the woman would have been devoured as soon as they fell in. This place, the Land of Illumination, was extremely dangerous. It wasn't a place where they could freeload. Everyone who could move had to contribute, or they would become food for the Een beasts. They couldn't stay there for long. The Een beasts would soon return to their lair. The thin man didn't continue. Instead, he ordered someone to seal the secret exit for later use. Then, with a grim expression, he said, "Let's go. If all goes well, Ahu and the others should meet us on the way. If we don't leave now, we won't be able to return when the Een wind blows." He led the others away. Hanli followed them, wanting to see their village and understand the situation before figuring out how to escape. Along the way, Hanli learned the woman's name was Mei Ning. She had been sucked into the ghostly house with her brother, but her brother wasn't there. Hanli guessed that the black lightning had the ability to teleport people randomly. Her brother might have been transported somewhere else. Otherwise, with so many cultivators present at the time, it was unlikely that only the two of them would have been sent there. They would eventually reunite if they kept searching. Hanli noticed the thin man, and the others walked very quickly. They seemed to have cultivated some basic external martial arts. It seemed that mortal martial arts were useful there. They were truly unlucky, encountering the Zhu Lingqi eruption. Their magic power had been completely sealed, leaving them with no chance to escape. The ghostly beings that appeared before weren't this powerful. There were even cases of low-level cultivators successfully avoiding them. Hanli arrived at the thin man's village just as a giant beast attacked it. How would the villagers deal with the giant beast? The Land of Illumination is fraught with peril. Food is scarce. Humans struggle to survive there. Continuing from the previous events, Hanli followed the thin man and the others back to their village. On the way, they encountered Ahu and his group, who were being chased by Een beasts. The thin man and his companions fought and killed the Een beasts, rescuing them. Then, they all returned to the village together. After walking for an hour, Hanli and the others finally emerged from the desert. Before them lay a dark expanse of scattered rocks. The rock field seemed to stretch endlessly. The rocks within the field were strangely shaped and jet black. They gave off a gloomy, unsettling feeling. However, upon seeing this, the thin man and the others sighed in relief. Their expressions showed a sense of ease. The dark clouds in the sky began to churn restlessly. The blue lightning became suddenly more frequent, and occasionally a bolt or two struck the nearby ground, creating craters of varying sizes. Hanli and Mei Ning were startled by this, but the others seemed to be accustomed to it. They quickly entered the rock field. The thin man called out, "Everyone, hurry up. The village gate is about to close. Don't get trapped outside." Hearing this, everyone started running, desperately rushing forward. Han Li and Mei Ning followed closely behind. Led by these people, Han Li and Mei Ning arrived at their village. The village was surrounded by 4 stone walls, 20 to 30 zhang high. The distance between the left and right ends of the walls was over 1,000 zhang wide. Every few zhang, there were sections of sturdy hardwood. Facing Han Li and the others was a large, raised wooden gate. On both sides of the gate, a dozen men armed with white spears stood vigilantly. Seeing the return of the thin man and the others, the guards greeted them loudly with excited expressions. They then lowered the gate and welcomed them in. The guards also saw Han Li and Mei Ning but didn't question them. Upon seeing the fresh fish and shrimp in the leather bags, they let out cries of surprise. Seeing this, Han Li guessed that the fish and shrimp were either very rare food or that food was very scarce there. Han Li looked around and noticed that most of the buildings in the village were simple and crude, built from dark stones, mostly square in shape. There was also a stone platform in the center of the village. The platform wasn't large, but it was several times taller than the other buildings, about 30 or 40 zhang high. A pale purple mist emanated from the top of the platform, covering the entire village. Whenever a blue lightning bolt struck the village, it was completely absorbed by this purple mist. This mist was definitely some kind of formation or restriction. However, Han Li didn't sense any spiritual energy from the platform. Instead, there was a cold energy emanating from it. Near the platform, there were several halls much larger than the ordinary stone houses. At the entrance of one of them, several people were pointing and gesturing at the thin man and the others, whispering amongst themselves. One of them, with a glint of golden light in his eyes, looked at Han Li and Mei Ning. Han Li's heart tightened. This person possessed profound inner strength. If they were outside, he wouldn't be afraid, but in this place, he needed to be cautious. The thin man introduced Han Li and Mei Ning to those people. They immediately turned their attention to Han Li and Mei Ning. Han Li remained calm, showing no apprehension. Mei Ning, on the other hand, looked a little uneasy, unsure how they would be treated. The thin man called Han Li and Mei Ning over. These people were the village elders and wanted to ask them a few questions. Han Li nodded and calmly led Mei Ning over. The group turned and entered the hall behind them. Han Li and Mei Ning followed them inside. A slightly plump, benevolent-looking elder sat in the center of the hall. He said kindly to Han Li and Mei Ning, "Please, have a seat. Now that you're here, and we're all of the human race, we will naturally do our best to help. However, this place is different from the outside world. Could you two please introduce yourselves first? Then I'll explain a few things about this place." Several other people sat on either side of him. Among them was the pale-faced man with narrow eyes, whose ambitious gaze was apparent. It was the same man who had looked at Han Li and Mei Ning outside the hall. Golden light shone in his eyes. After glancing at Han Li, his gaze settled on Mei Ning. Although he didn't speak, a strange look flickered in his eyes. Han Li smiled casually and replied calmly, "We don't have much to say. We encountered ghostly beings at sea and were swept in here. As for our previous identities, what use are they here? It's best not to speak of them." Seeing the storage pouch at Han Li's waist, the elder knew they were cultivators. He then told Han Li and Mei Ning that there were 5 or 6 other cultivators in the village. He was one of them, and he welcomed cultivators to join their village. In the land of illumination, although they couldn't use magic power or divine senses, they could use illumination power and crude weapons. Illumination power was an external force similar to magic power. Although it couldn't be used to directly cast spells, it could be used with beast cores to set up small formations. This was quite useful for the village. Even if they weren't proficient in formations, a cultivator's body was stronger than an ordinary person's, so they would still be a great help. The entire hall suddenly trembled. Rumbling sounds, one after another, came from the distance. It seemed some colossal being was charging towards the village. The faces of everyone in the hall changed. They all stood up and walked outside. Han Li and Mei Ning followed. The elders were solemnly directing hundreds of young men and women onto the thick stone walls. They held various white spears and bows and arrows. Although everyone looked tense, they were also orderly, as if they had experienced this many times before. Han Li climbed onto the roof of a tall building and looked out. He saw that a short distance outside the village, flying sand and swirling winds danced wildly, whipping up a strange black wind. Nothing could be seen within it. Wherever the black wind passed, a layer of black frost appeared on the ground. It seemed incredibly cold. This must be the Yin wind the thin man had mentioned. It was indeed something ordinary people couldn't withstand. However, the Yin wind dissipated about 100 zhang from the village. It couldn't cross an invisible boundary. A huge, shadowy figure, over 10 zhang tall, rushed out from the black wind. Seeing the figure clearly, Han Li gasped. The figure resembled a gray giant ape, magnified more than 10 times. However, this beast had 4 eyes, fleshy wings, and a pair of meaty whiskers. It held a dark, strange club in one hand. Its 4 eyes and the strange club glowed blood red, exuding an aura of endless slaughter. Some villagers recognized it as a Jiaozheng beast and hurriedly ordered people to bring large shields. Immediately, a large group of women, children, and white-haired elders emerged, bringing all sorts of shields to those on the wall. They then hurried back down. The giant beast charged to within 30 zhang in the blink of an eye. From the nearby ground, several thick purple tentacles suddenly shot out. They tightly bound the giant beast's legs. Unable to keep its balance, the giant beast crashed heavily to the ground. Those on the stone walls stumbled and swayed. Han Li subconsciously looked back at the high platform. At some point, 4 people had sat down on the platform, their bodies emitting a faint purple aura. They seemed to be casting a spell. Han Li's heart stirred. This must be the illumination power. Someone shouted, "Attack!" A dense rain of spears and swords rained down on the fallen giant beast. Han Li soon learned the secrets of the land of illumination and the method of escape. Mei Ning, however, completely despaired at the escape method, believing it was impossible to achieve the necessary conditions. Plot analysis of A Mortal's Journey to Immortality episode 140. Let's be frank. This red devil has been staring at Mei Ning for a long time and finally came to a conclusion. Mei Ning is truly beautiful. Moreover, the character's voice acting, as well as the micro-expressions, are all very well done. I have to say, the characters in Mortal animation are getting better and better looking. Even though it's animation, it feels very much like watching real people. Red Devil couldn't help but think, if this level of technology continues to improve, what kind of beautiful celestial beings will the female characters who appear later be? Interpreting the essence of anime, savoring the stories behind human destiny. Hello everyone, I'm Apu Fadian Red from the Mortal Realm Zone. Welcome to watch the original interpretation video of a record of a mortal's journey to immortality. At the beginning of episode 140, after Han Li was sucked into the ghost house, he seemed to be floating in the air, as if even time had stopped. This should be the animation's way of emphasizing Han Li's various senses becoming abnormally dull at this moment, until finally he lost all consciousness. During this process, he vaguely heard a woman calling brother. Han Li thought it was his younger sister, but obviously this voice came from Mei Ning. After an unknown amount of time, when Han Li woke up, he found his body almost unable to move. He had also lost all his magic power and couldn't even open his storage pouch. Of course, this is not the point. The point is, on top of him lay a beautiful stranger, face down. According to the timeline, Mei Ning must have fallen from the sky, landing on Han Li and using him as a human cushion. Then they both fainted. After maintaining this position of a beautiful woman pressing on him for a long time, Han Li finally woke up and Mei Ning woke up shortly after. Next, just as Mei Ning, because of her lack of strength, was about to kiss Han Li, old devil Han, with the strength of being single for over 100 years, clearly rejected her. Yuan Yao, upon hearing this, said, "This scene is very familiar to me. Han Li has always been insensitive to romance." An ambiguous atmosphere lingered for a while. Then the camera focused on Han Li closing his eyes for a moment, and a fish beside them, thrashing about. This alludes to Han Li, in the original novel, suppressing a particular physical desire. Those who have read the original should understand. At this time, to say he didn't have any thoughts or feelings would be impossible, unless Han Li is completely abnormal. Next, Mei Ning's line is truly a stroke of genius, coupled with the precise voice acting. Sorry, it really made Han Li feel quite good about the hug. Mei Ning was very nervous after getting up and didn't know what to do for a moment, so she subconsciously touched her hair. Similar to how Han Li can't help but touch his nose when he's embarrassed. But Han Li thought Mei Ning was turning sideways to adjust her appearance, so he immediately said, "There's no need to bother, Mississippi." Han Li immediately regretted it after he said that because it made things even more awkward. Why would Mei Ning secretly adjust her clothes and hair? Doesn't that mean he did something to Mei Ning just now? Of course, if you want a serious interpretation, it's that Mei Ning said, "I've troubled you," and Han Li said, "There's no need to bother, Mississippi." It's similar to "no trouble, you're welcome," or "don't mention it." Mei Ning turned and glanced at him, and Han Li quickly turned his head away in fright. Wow, you say "no trouble, you're welcome, don't mention it," but then you quickly turn your head away in fright? Clearly, Han Li has a guilty conscience. What did he do? He knows in his heart, just like Mei Ning does, that he took advantage of the young lady. He's now extremely guilty. Han Li is at a loss, so he quickly changes the subject and starts awkward small talk, saying, "It seems you don't know where we are either." This transition is even more forced than Red Devil's usual forced advertising. As the saying goes, if you're not embarrassed, then the embarrassed one is someone else. Han Li continues, "Why don't we go out for a walk and ask around?" The implication is, "Miss, come with me." This is the first step in his attempt to whisk Mei Ning away. Mei Ning obediently nods and asks, "Okay?" Although it's only one word, the voice acting is absolutely top-notch. How many male Taoist friends will fall for Mei Ning's voice in this life? Mei Ning's fanbase is probably exploding from this moment on. They both quietly cast spells again, but obviously, it still doesn't work. Cultivators who have lost their most reliable magic power are practically no different from mortals. Then Mei Ning says 2 sentences, "Fellow Taoist, you. What are you doing? What are you doing?" This voice acting is simply sweet. And when Han Li pulls her down and tells her to be quiet, Mei Ning acts exceptionally obedient. Let's not mention Jian Yu's scene because the fish on the ground, all of them combined, are probably still smaller than Miss Mei, who fell from the sky. The animation's portrayal of the fish is indeed a bit stingy. Couldn't they have added a few more fish? Red Devil's focus today is still on Miss Mei Ning. Because of the Fire Lin Beast's arrival, Han Li had a blast. First, a waist hug, then carrying his wife back to the village vibes. He picks her up and runs, even using the Luoyan step. So, for this moment, Miss Mei Ning, don't even think about getting down. Of course, if we're being serious, Han Li is acting the hero and saving the beauty, so naturally he's full of righteousness. We see Han Li carrying the beauty on his shoulder, his feet like the wind, and multiple afterimages trailing behind him. Regardless of whether he has magic power or not, old Devil Han's running skills are truly impressive. Han Li thinks to himself, the people holding torches up ahead seem to be signaling us to go over. Clearly, Han Li is overthinking it. They want to use him as bait to lure the Firelin beasts and kill them. Sure enough, if Han Li hadn't been there to act as a human skateboard, he probably would have died there. He wouldn't have had a chance to escape. Red Devil continues to focus on Mei Ning's reactions. Han Li is sliding on the ground, his back probably scraped raw by now. He's definitely going to have some back pain later. but Mei Ning is having a great time up there. When Hanli stops, Mei Ning realizes her position, lying on top of Hanli, seems a bit inappropriate. So, startled, she quickly stands up straight and freezes. This scene is very much like. It's like they're a couple experiencing first love. And when Hanli tremblingly tries to stand up, Mei Ning quickly goes to help him. Miss Mei Ning is truly so thoughtful. Just then, a man aims a bow and arrow in their direction. Mei Ning is startled by this sudden action and quickly clutches Hanli's arm with both hands. Then a sword flies out, but kills a fire Lin beast next to them. The man clearly intended to scare Hanli and Mei Ning, because his sword was first aimed at Hanli and Mei Ning before suddenly turning to kill the fire Lin beast. This display of skill clearly shows his intentions. And it seems this man has taken a liking to Mei Ning's beauty, staring at her for a long time. The man with the broadsword says, "This is the land of exquisite brightness. No matter what your status is outside, it's useless here, even if you're a cultivator." Note the wording here. He didn't say you plural, but you singular. Clearly, this is directed at Hanli. He's taken a liking to Mei Ning and is now trying to control Hanli. What a clever tactic. That's why he says, if you want to live, follow me. If they actually go, Mei Ning's situation will be precarious. The old man called Great Elder wants to stay and wait for Ahu and the others. But the broadsword-wielding man named Tianji refuses outright, saying that he's in charge once they leave the village. Then he takes the people and leaves directly. Simply put, he doesn't care about Ahu and the others' lives. Every man for himself. Abandoning the rest of the team also suggests that the land of exquisite brightness might be even more cruel than the outside world. The Great Elder sighs and warns Hanli and Mei Ning about the dangers here, urging them to follow quickly. Mei Ning blinks and looks at Hanli. At this point, they've formed a united front. They exchange a knowing glance and then follow. On their way back to the village, their luck isn't so good. They encounter a Zhengning beast leading a group of fire Lin beasts. Then they start their desperate wilderness parkour mode. If we can't fight, we run for our lives. Wilderness parkour mode. Mei Ning runs while clutching her chest. Maybe holding it helps her run faster. If you ask why Red Devil is observing so closely, it's because the animation is very detailed. Our ability to scrutinize and analyze meticulously is born out of necessity. Skipping the details of their frantic escape and how Hanli dodges, let's jump straight to the village entrance. Before Hanli and the others can run into the village, the gate closes. Someone mentions that the Great Elder and the others are still outside. The reply, too late. Similar to how the broadsword man abandoned Ahu's team earlier, the logic is the same. The priority here is the greater good. To put it bluntly, anyone outside the walls can be abandoned at any time. So, we immediately see another scene where the elderly Great Elder, unable to keep up, falls behind. If Hanli hadn't saved him with the Luoyan step, the Great Elder would likely be dead. Of course, Hanli didn't save him out of pure altruism. He believes that saving this person will earn him gratitude that will be helpful for entering the village later. The melee combat scene is quite thrilling. Red Devil isn't good at explaining it, so let's skip it again. I'll just mention a few points. First, that broadsword-wielding man, Tianji, is a fierce fighter and very powerful. He poses a significant threat to Hanli and Mei Ning. Second, the exquisite brightness crystals are quite useful. Even in this place where magic power is unusable, they can be used to set up small formations to unleash exquisite brightness power for attacks. Third, the villagers here are all very strong. Even the women join the fight to defend the village. This suggests that the village truly doesn't tolerate idlers. Their fighting style is also very sophisticated. The village must be frequently attacked. After the Zhengning beast is killed, the Great Elder starts talking with Hanli again. It turns out he was once a cultivator, a foundation establishment cultivator, in fact. When he reminisces about his past, His expression and micro-movements show that he's still quite proud of his past. Hanli also mentioned before that these exquisite brightness beasts are only about as strong as low-level demonic beasts. If a Foundation establishment cultivator had their magic power, they could easily kill them. Mei Ning's heart stirs upon hearing this, because she's also a Foundation establishment cultivator. But now, unable to use her magic power, she's become like a weak woman among mortals. It will be difficult for her to survive in such a dangerous place. And crucially, she's also very beautiful, which adds another layer of risk. Then, the Great Elder invites Hanli and the beautiful woman into the village and explains the situation there to Hanli along the way. They encounter an elder who manages the exquisite brightness crystals. He's holding a box which presumably contains the exquisite brightness crystals. These are strictly controlled items. As for why they're strictly controlled, firstly, they're precious. Secondly, they need to prevent cultivators from using the exquisite brightness power to rebel. It's like having a gun but no bullets. It's useless. Mei Ning looks around as they walk. She's looking for her brother. Hanli notices her looking around and stares at her questioningly. Mei Ning is panicking. Could this guy also have ulterior motives? She wonders. Mei Ning is extremely insecure now. Only after Hanli asks does he learn that Mei Ning's brother is missing. She wants to find him. Mei Ning's expression as she speaks truly makes people want to protect her. Of course, Mei Ning's comfort now depends on Hanli. Hanli consoles her, saying, "Perhaps your brother was transported somewhere else. I'll go ask around later. There should be other villages." Mei Ning feels much more reassured after hearing this and trots along behind Hanli. So, because of Hanli, a spark of hope has been ignited in Mei Ning's heart. "Big brother Han, I'll follow you from now on," she thinks. Alright, that's all for this episode's interpretation. Fellow Taoists who like Mei Ning, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. For more exciting plot interpretations, please continue to follow Fadian Red. Interpreting Human Destiny, a record of a mortal's journey to immortality. Original author, Wang Yu. We are all mortals. The word fellow Taoist speaks volumes of life's vicissitudes. Please give us a like and subscribe, fellow Taoists. Let's continue our chat in the next episode. Immortal's Journey to Immortality Episode 142. Hanli never expected that Mei Ning would possess a spiritual conduit physique capable of temporarily restoring some of his magic power. Continuing from the previous events, Hanli obtained the cultivation insights of the nascent soul old monster and a scripture for the written language of the demon race. He then left the stone house and wandered around the village, observing the unusual architecture. He spoke briefly with some nearby villagers, who were quite simple and answered his questions. Through these conversations, Hanli gained a deeper understanding of the severing spirit land. There were no iron ores or similar materials there. Weapons could only be crafted from the bones of several particularly tough Yin beasts. These bones needed to be soaked in a liquid called sinking water, which hardened them and imbued them with some Yin fire power. Once forged into blades, they were more effective against Yin beasts. However, the Yin fire was temporary, so the weapons had to be periodically soaked in sinking water to maintain their effectiveness. This piqued Hanli's interest in sinking water. He also learned that the severing spirit land experienced Yin wind days a few times each month. During these days, most areas were swept by icy, bone-chilling black Yin winds. Anyone caught in these winds would turn into black ice sculptures. Safety could only be found within the village, protected by formations. However, this was also the time when Yin beasts were most active, frequently attacking the village, either alone or in groups. Hanli also inquired about the pale-faced man. Fengxing was an outsider who had been drawn into this place some years ago. He possessed profound inner strength and had killed powerful Yin beasts on multiple occasions. At a young age, he had become a village elder, responsible for teaching complex martial arts techniques. Finally, Han Li slowly returned to the thatched house. Just as he reached the door, he heard Feng Xing's voice from inside. The man was proposing marriage to Mei Ning. Han Li then understood that Feng Xing had taken a liking to Mei Ning and mistakenly assumed there was an intimate relationship between them. This explained his hostility. It wasn't surprising, though. Feng Xing had entered the Severing Spirit Land years earlier. The village women all had rough, dark skin, so he naturally looked down on them. Mei Ning, a rare beauty, had captivated him. Mei Ning, unwilling to marry a mortal and simply survive there, rejected him outright. Somewhat enraged by the rejection, Feng Xing attempted to force himself on her. Mei Ning screamed. Han Li sighed inwardly. Though he had no relationship with her, she was a fellow cultivator who had arrived with him. He wasn't cold-blooded. More importantly, Feng Xing was no match for him. Han Li kicked open the door and calmly walked in. Feng Xing, with a lewd smile, had Mei Ning cornered. Hearing the commotion, he turned to look. Seeing Han Li, his expression darkened. Mei Ning, pale with fear, saw Han Li and immediately rushed out to hide behind him. She warned Han Li that the man seemed to harbor ill intentions toward him. Han Li nodded, indicating he understood. He said slowly, "It seems you're quite confident in your martial arts. However, setting your sights on me is rather foolish." Hearing this, Feng Xing said viciously, "Foolish? It's been a long time since I've heard anyone say that to me. In return, I'll break one of your arms as a small punishment." He immediately charged forward, intending to cripple Han Li's other arm. Han Li used the Luoyan step, his body flickering. After a blur, 3 or 4 identical figures suddenly appeared, directly confronting the incoming Feng Xing. Feng Xing attacked the figures, only to discover they were mere afterimages. Han Li had already moved behind him. A small sword appeared at his throat. Feng Xing's hair stood on end. Han Li told him not to move, or he would be forced to kill him and flee the village. Feng Xing's body stiffened, afraid to move. Since Feng Xing wanted to break his arm, Han Li would return the favor. After breaking Feng Xing's forearm, Han Li warned the man that he would kill him if he dared to step foot in the house again. Recognizing the danger, the man immediately left. Han Li spared him, not wanting to be hunted down by the villagers. However, with a broken arm, it would likely take at least half a month for the man to fully heal. Han Li figured he might be long gone by then. Of course, if the opportunity arose, Han Li would also kill him discreetly. After all, they had become enemies, and the man wouldn't let him go either. Seeing this, Mei Ning hurriedly thanked Han Li. He, in turn, reminded her that if she truly had no feelings for the man, she should avoid him. If he stayed in the village, accepting his proposal wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. Mei Ning, having sworn to only marry a high-ranking cultivator, was naturally unwilling to marry a mortal lacking spiritual roots. She also sensed Han Li's calm and unhurried demeanor, as if he was quite confident about escaping. Her eyes reddened as she asked him if he planned to escape alone. Han Li didn't hide anything and told her directly that, alone, he was somewhat confident he could reach the summit of Stormwind Mountain. He lacked the ability to bring anyone else. If real danger arose, he would be too preoccupied with his own survival, and Mei Ning would certainly die. She was still young, and it would be best for her to stay. Perhaps in the future, another opportunity to leave would appear. Hearing this, Mei Ning's face turned deathly pale. Seeing this, Han Li sighed softly and closed his eyes to rest. Taking her would only be a burden. If she stayed in the village, her life wouldn't be in immediate danger. It just meant giving up further cultivation. He didn't feel particularly uneasy about it. A moment later, Mei Ning suddenly spoke. "If I can help you temporarily recover a bit of your magic power, would you be willing to take me with you?" Disbelief registered on Han Li's face. A resolute look flashed across Mei Ning's eyes as she repeated, "I have a way to allow you to regain a little magic power for a short time. It should greatly assist your escape. However, in exchange, besides taking me with you, fellow Taoist Han must agree to another condition. Han Li knew that if he could truly recover some magic power, his chances of escape, originally 5 or 6 out of 10, would immediately increase to 8 or 9. This small amount of magic power would be enough to open his spirit beast pouch and storage pouch. Inside his storage pouch were several treasures that didn't require magic power to activate and could automatically exhibit their wondrous effects. Once retrieved, his safety would be greatly assured. He could also use the soul-gathering pearl within his belly to barely control the soul-gathering beast. Although the Yin beasts weren't ghostly spirits, they were formed from condensed Yin energy. The soul-gathering beast could surely subdue them easily. Thus, the most threatening Yin beasts would no longer be a concern. Mei Ning explained, "I possess a spiritual conduit physique and carry spiritual qi within me. Spiritual qi cannot be instantly suppressed by severing spirit qi. I can transfer my spiritual qi to fellow Taoist Han through a secret technique. This way, fellow Taoist Han will temporarily regain a bit of magic power." She pressed the thumb of her other hand lightly onto the red sand on his hand, then quickly released it. The bright red sand gradually faded. A silver phoenix pattern emerged, smooth, flowing, and lifelike. Pleasant surprise appeared on Han Li's face. "This is the mark of a spiritual conduit phoenix maiden. You truly do possess a spiritual conduit physique." Mei Ning wanted Han Li to help her find her older brother and then take them both out of the severing spirit land. Han Li only agreed to half of this condition. Using this method, Han Li unexpectedly gained spiritual qi and finally regained a sliver of magic power. As revealed previously, Mei Ning possessed a spiritual conduit phoenix marrow physique, a physique found only in women. While not as rare as the once-in-a-century extreme Yin physique, it was still extremely renowned and practically universally known in the cultivation world. Female cultivators with this physique, after entering the foundation establishment stage, would generate a trace of refined spiritual qi within their bodies. This spiritual qi was known as one of the 7 most refined spiritual powers. While it had no effect on the women themselves, it could allow men to drastically increase their cultivation through marrow cleansing. Of course, this cultivation boosting effect was somewhat less effective for high-level cultivators, but it was still comparable to rare, precious ancient pills. This spiritual qi could only be transferred to a man willingly and not through any other means. These women possessed only a single trace of this spiritual qi in their lifetime, and it could only be given to one man. If beforehand, the woman lost her virginity, the spiritual qi would dissipate on its own. Han Li pondered the spiritual conduit phoenix, marrow physique. He thought that if he received the spiritual qi, he might actually be able to use some magic power. After all, spiritual qi was still one of the 7 most refined spiritual powers. It would be enough to forcibly open his storage pouch and spirit beast pouch. Han Li decided to agree and asked her to state her other condition. Mei Ning hoped he would find her older brother and also bring him out of the severing spirit land. Han Li thought for a moment and shook his head. He could only agree to half of the condition. He couldn't stay in the severing spirit land for too long. Prolonged exposure to severing spirit qi required earth and stone qi to recuperate. If he delayed too long, the purple immortal grass would die. He could only search for 3 months at most. If he hadn't found her brother after that time, he would leave immediately. The severing spirit land wasn't large, and 3 months should be sufficient. Mei Ning agreed and directly asked when he wanted the transfer. The severing spirit land was full of dangers. Accidents could happen at any time. Han Li wanted to retrieve a few life-saving treasures right away. Mei Ning nodded without surprise, then, blushing slightly, whispered, "My magic power is currently sealed. I can only transfer the spiritual qi to you through mouth-to-mouth contact." Seeing her charmingly shy appearance, Han Li's heart skipped a beat. He naturally wouldn't refuse such a delightful proposition. A strange feeling arose within him. The atmosphere in the room immediately became intimate. Seeing Mei Ning lower her head silently, Han Li realized she wasn't the proactive type. Without a word, he stood up and sat beside her. Mei Ning subconsciously tried to move away, but was embraced by a strong arm. Her heart pounded. Looking up, she met Han Li's playful gaze. Blushing deeply, she instinctively wanted to lower her head again. Han Li lifted his hand and cupped her delicate face. Mei Ning's mind went blank. She felt lightheaded and couldn't think straight. Han Li inhaled deeply, taking in the faint fragrance emanating from her. Then, captivated by the shyness and allure in her beautiful eyes, his gaze became heated. Unable to resist any longer, he leaned down and pressed his lips firmly against hers. Warm, fragrant, even with a hint of sweetness, it was intoxicating. A look of dazed weakness appeared in her eyes, but a moment later, she snapped back to reality. She weakly tried to push him away. Although mentally prepared for this intimacy, she still instinctively resisted. She had never been this intimate with a man before. Her heart raced with panic. Han Li roughly pinned her hand behind her back and pressed his body heavily against her soft and delicate frame. They both fell onto the stone bed. His mouth continued to greedily devour the sweet nectar of her lips. Mei Ning's strength was far inferior to Han Li's. After a brief, weak struggle, she resigned herself to her fate and stopped resisting. Enveloped by a strong masculine scent, her eyes squeezed shut and her cheeks flushed crimson. Her long lashes trembled slightly, her mind clearly in turmoil. She completely forgot about transferring the spiritual qi. However, Han Li's mental fortitude was far beyond ordinary. A moment later, the burning passion in his eyes subsided, returning to a cool composure. His lips parted from hers. He tilted his head towards her delicate ear and said with a chuckle, "Miss May, although the pleasures between a man and a woman are indeed quite wonderful, don't forget about transferring the spiritual qi." Mei Ning's face flushed even redder. Han Li, abandoning his previous roughness, gently kissed her lips again. A cool sensation flowed from her mouth into his body. Han Li didn't delay. He immediately climbed off her and sat down cross-legged nearby, beginning to circulate the spiritual qi. Mei Ning also sat up and hurriedly adjusted her disheveled clothes. However, the blush on her face lingered. With this spiritual qi, Han Li was indeed able to mobilize a small amount of magic power. He first retrieved a pile of items from his storage pouch, including treasures, demon beast materials, and metallic skins. Then, he stored the golden net, flower basket, and silver bell ancient treasures inside. Seeing Han Li's numerous treasures, Mei Ning asked if he was a core formation cultivator. Han Li didn't hide it and revealed he was a nascent soul cultivator. Mei Ning was surprised and delighted. Han Li then summoned the soul-gathering beast. Upon appearing, the initially languid beast suddenly perked up. After sniffing the air, it became excited, hopping around Han Li. Seeing this, Han Li smiled. He selected a few items from the pile and placed them inside his robe. Then, he pushed open the door and looked outside. Very few people were outside. It seemed most had returned to their houses to rest. Han Li beckoned to the soul-gathering beast, and it flew into his sleeve. He turned and smiled at Mei Ning, then swaggered out. Han Li moved nimbly, avoiding being seen or heard. He entered the stone house containing the sinking water and filled several bottles, taking a small portion. Then, he went to Feng Xing's residence and released a three-colored bloodthirsty insect inside. He barely managed to mobilize the last trace of his divine sense and commanded the insect to kill Feng Xing. He returned to his own dwelling without looking back. Just as he turned a corner, he heard a scream ring out from Feng Xing's residence. Han Li continued walking back, his expression unchanged. A commotion began to erupt in the distance. Since he had already made an enemy of Feng Xing, he naturally took the opportunity to eliminate this future threat. Otherwise, Having Feng Xing hold a grudge would always make him uneasy. Before he returned to his dwelling, the tiny bit of magic power granted by the spiritual qi completely dissipated. His divine sense could no longer leave his body. When Hanli entered the house, Mei Ning had fallen asleep. Looking at her sweet, intoxicating sleeping face, Hanli recalled their kiss. His heart warmed slightly, but then, seeing her slightly curled up, as if somewhat embarrassed, he hesitated for a moment. Then, from the pile of items on the table, he picked up a large demon beast hide and covered her with it. She seemed to feel the warmth, and her previously furrowed brows relaxed. Then, subconsciously, she pulled the hide around herself, still fast asleep. Seeing this, Hanli smiled. It was no wonder. Although her physique was far superior to ordinary people, she was still a woman. Their previous encounter had left her utterly exhausted. While waiting for him, drowsiness had unknowingly overtaken her, and she had fallen into a deep sleep. The villagers guessed that Hanli had killed Feng Xing. They wanted to cooperate with him and rule the village together. Would Hanli agree? Please give us a like and subscribe, fellow Taoists. Let's continue our chat in the next episode. A Mortal's Journey to Immortality episode 143. Hanli refused to rule the village with the others. He had chanced upon a refining method for the arrival vestments. Continuing from last time, he took a pile of things out of his storage pouch. He waited for Mei Ning to wake up and then asked him to use the flying needle magic tool. Hanli bestowed gold upon Mei Ning to craft several leather garments from high-grade beast hides with living attributes. These were meant to protect against the cold winds. Mei Ning agreed. Just as Hanli wanted to say something more, the long-bearded elder unexpectedly paid them a visit. This elder had previously given Hanli some guidance, so Hanli couldn't very well avoid him. He opened the door, preparing to invite him inside. Upon opening the door, he discovered two other elders outside. One had a red face and white beard, the other a hunched back and sinister appearance. Hanli didn't ask about their intentions and directly invited them inside. Upon seeing Mei Ning, they revealed a hint of surprise, but quickly composed themselves and offered him a slight bow. Mei Ning returned the gesture and stood beside Hanli, waiting for the three to sit down. Only then did Hanli inquire about the identities of the other two. After the long-bearded elder's introductions, Hanli learned that both were cultivators from the Great Jin dynasty. One was Cultivator Yun from the Heavenly Fortune sect, and the other was Cultivator Jin from the Four Seas Academy. Hanli nodded in acknowledgement. The two others politely welcomed him in return. The three elders had come to express their goodwill and to recruit Hanli. They meant Hanli and Mei Ning no harm. They explained their recruitment efforts by pointing out that Hanli had managed to cripple Elder Feng's arm, after which the man had been killed by strange insects. This showed that, even though Hanli's cultivation had been lost, he still possessed other formidable methods. The elders wanted to be the rulers of the village. They were formerly cultivators and considered themselves superior. Now, their status was the same as ordinary villagers. They too went hungry and had to risk their lives hunting beasts. They wanted to completely seize control of the village, so all the village's resources would be under their control. They wouldn't have to worry about food or drink, and they could assign dangerous tasks to the ordinary villagers. They wouldn't have to risk their own lives fighting beasts. Previously, there were too few cultivators, so they didn't dare to act rashly. But now, if Hanli joined them, they could naturally achieve great things. Hanli wasn't interested and directly refused them. He didn't plan to stay in the village. Seeing that Hanli and Mei Ning planned to climb Stormwind Mountain, the three revealed looks of disbelief. To dissuade them, Cultivator Yun and Cultivator Jin recounted their own experiences climbing Stormwind Mountain. Not long after they had arrived, they too were unwilling to die there. So, after preparing, they set off for Stormwind Mountain with three other cultivators from another village. However, before they even got close to the mountain, one of their companions was discovered by the Een beasts nearby and lost his life at the foot of the mountain. By the time they finally reached Stormwind Mountain, the remaining 2 companions hadn't even climbed a quarter of the way up before being frozen to death by the Een wind. As for the 2 of them, because they carried some flame stones, they were barely able to continue. But the higher they climbed, the stronger the Een wind became, making it almost impossible to stand. In the end, they didn't even reach the minerals halfway up the mountain before being blown off the cliffs by the fierce winds several times. Although they luckily survived, they didn't dare continue. After returning to the village, because the Een wind had penetrated their bones, they immediately fell seriously ill. It took several months before they could get out of bed again. From then on, they completely gave up on the idea of escaping through Stormwind Mountain. Most importantly, the idea that when the fissure opens, one could escape from the summit of Stormwind Mountain was just a legend. It might not be possible at all. After hearing this, Han Li still wanted to try. He also promised that if he truly couldn't climb to the summit of Stormwind Mountain, he would naturally consider their suggestion. Seeing this, the 3 could only force a smile and take their leave. After leaving Han Li's residence and walking some distance, the hunchbacked elder asked with a hostile expression, could he turn around and betray us? The long-bearded elder felt that Han Li and Mei Ning wouldn't betray them. Firstly, betraying them wouldn't bring any benefits, and secondly, Han Li was a smart person and wouldn't do something so foolish. He only hoped that the 2 would give up on their own before even getting close to Stormwind Mountain. After all, if they made a move now, they only had a 50% chance of success. With Han Li and Mei Ning joining them, their strength would increase considerably. It was also thanks to Han Li that they had eliminated their biggest obstacle, Feng Tianji. Otherwise, with that man's martial arts, he would have been a major problem. The red-faced elder nodded in agreement. But just in case, they should still send someone to keep an eye on them. The long-bearded elder agreed to this as well, but cautioned to be careful not to be discovered. He wasn't sure if it was his imagination, but he felt that Han Li seemed very confident about escaping. When he heard them describe the dangers of Stormwind Mountain, he didn't seem to care at all. Perhaps Han Li truly did have a way to climb to the summit of Stormwind Mountain. The hunchbacked elder shook his head. He didn't believe Han Li could succeed. The long-bearded elder thought it over carefully and also felt it was unlikely. But upon hearing this, Cultivator Yun, the red-faced one, felt a stir in his heart. A thought surfaced in his mind. After speaking a few words to Mei Ning, Han Li also left the house. He first went to the residence of the middle-aged man with the sealed cultivation and found that he had indeed been killed by the gold-devouring insects, his throat bitten through. Then he asked the villagers about the local geography, the locations of other villages, and the distribution of the Een beasts. Based on the villagers' descriptions, Han Li drew a detailed map. Han Li's preparations were almost complete. He informed the village's Grand Elder of his intention to climb Stormwind Mountain. Seeing Han Li's determination, the Grand Elder didn't try to persuade him further and agreed. Han Li and Mei Ning returned to their residence to rest for the night, planning to leave the village the next day. However, Cultivator Yun secretly paid them a visit. Although he didn't know if Han Li truly had the ability to escape, it was still a sliver of hope. So he wanted to entrust Han Li with the ancient scroll containing the oral instructions for refining the arrival vestments. If Han Li managed to survive and escape, and had the opportunity, he hoped Han Li would deliver the scroll to the Heavenly Fortune sect in the Great Jin Dynasty. The arrival vestment was one of the 3 great spiritual treasures of the Heavenly Fortune sect, traditionally only cultivated by the sect leader. Cultivator Yun was the 57th generation sect leader of the Heavenly Fortune sect. Now, the Heavenly Fortune sect had declined and become a minor sect in Hua Yun Prefecture of the Great Jin Dynasty. Therefore, he, being only at the foundation establishment stage, held the position of sect leader. Now, he was certainly unable to leave this desolate land. He didn't want the Heavenly Fortune sect to lose this secret technique. Of course, he was merely seeking peace of mind. Hanli could also learn the arrival vestment technique. It would be considered his reward. Even if the secret technique couldn't return to the heavenly fortune sect, as long as it could be passed down through Hanli, it would be better than it being lost completely. Hanli was a little speechless. So this heavenly fortune sect leader was just seeking peace of mind. This way, he only stood to gain without any loss. If Hanli didn't go to the Great Jin dynasty, he naturally wouldn't need to return the ancient scroll. If he did go to that legendary great empire, it seemed like delivering something would be a trivial matter. Hanli was also somewhat interested in this unique vestment, so he agreed. Cultivator Yun was overjoyed. After chatting for a while, he took his leave. Hanli looked at the ancient script within the scroll and found that the materials required to refine the arrival vestment were truly extraordinary. No wonder the Heavenly Fortune sect, despite possessing the refining technique, didn't dare to dream of actually refining the vestment. Hanli climbed Stormwind Mountain and encountered Wen Tianren, a descendant of the Six Paths. This marked the beginning of their final showdown. Pai Hun devours a large number of Yin beasts and unexpectedly gains a new ability. Hanli encounters Wen Tianren. Wen Tianren's time has come. Continuing from last time, Hanli discovers that refining the arrival vestment actually requires the spirit core of a transformation stage demon beast as the main material. Therefore, he feels that the materials for refining the arrival vestment are somewhat outrageous. However, because Hanli possesses the poison glue Pai Hun, he has a chance of successfully refining it. After resting for a night, Hanli and Mei Ning leave the village. Hanli then takes Mei Ning to the nearest village. He thinks that if Mei Ning's brother is still alive, he must have also gone to another village. He plans to find him and take him to Stormwind Mountain. In Red Earth Village, Hanli and Mei Ning find Mei Ning's brother's belongings. It turns out that Mei Ning's brother, shortly after entering the desolate Yin land, was eaten by Yin beasts. The people of Red Earth Village buried his remains on the spot, and his belongings were placed in the village warehouse. Now that he has learned what happened to Mei Ning's brother, Hanli goes to hunt Yin beasts and collect desolate Yin beast essences. Goo cultivators use desolate Yin beast essences to create puppets, indicating that they are indeed useful. These essences are unique to the desolate Yin land and may not be found elsewhere. Most importantly, Pai Hun is the natural enemy of Yin beasts. It can easily devour their souls. Hanli only needs to cut open the Yin beast's skull to see if there's an essence inside. After absorbing a large amount of Yin beast essences, Pai Hun suddenly gains the ability to transform into a Ju Yuan. Its fur also gradually turns silver-white. This greatly surprises Hanli. According to the original Pai Hun beast cultivation method provided by Yuan Yao, a true Pai Hun beast doesn't have this ability. Moreover, after advancing, its fur should be jet black. However, this beast is only a semi-finished product, its refinement not yet complete. The Yin beast essences of the desolate Yin land seem to be quite special. Perhaps it's due to these two factors that this unique advancement has occurred. Hanli wants Pai Hun to continue evolving this way. After all, the true refinement method is too bloody. Even though Hanli isn't a saint, he doesn't want to continue refining it using that method. He has obtained over 100 desolate Yin beast essences. However, time is limited. They must reach the summit of Stormwind Mountain before the next fissure opens. Therefore, Hanli has Pai Hun transform into a Ju Yuan for travel. He and Mei Ning stand on its shoulders. Soon, they arrive at a towering mountain in the northeast corner of the desolate Yin land. From afar, only half of the mountainside is visible, the rest pierces the clouds. The mountain is entirely composed of bare black rock. No vegetation can survive on it. From a height of about 3,000 feet, fierce Yin winds begin to blow across the mountain. Ordinary people who step into them could be turned into black ice sculptures. The area around the mountain is even more gloomy and terrifying than other places. Lightning flashes in the sky, thunder rumbles incessantly, and icy winds howl on the ground. Flying sand and rocks make it feel like stepping into the underworld. Because the desolate Yin Qi is extremely dense here, several extremely powerful Yin beasts dwell in this area. Of course, to Pai Han, they are merely delicious food. After ordering Pai Han to eliminate these Yin beasts, Han Li recalls it into his sleeve. Pai Han begins to sleep soundly. Because the people here understand the general pattern of the fissure opening, Han Li learns this from them. The fissure will tear open again in about half a month. If they miss this opportunity, they might have to wait another 6 months. Han Li and Mei Ning easily climb to a height of 3,000 feet. But beyond that point, bitterly cold Yin winds appear on the mountain. As the altitude increases, the wind gradually intensifies. Han Li and Mei Ning put on several layers of living attribute demon beast hide garments. But even so, their faces turn pale and their skin stings. Han Li takes out a wind-repelling pearl from his bosom. The pearl emits a faint fluorescent light, enveloping them within its glow. Pai Han devours a large number of Yin beasts and unexpectedly gains a new ability. Han Li encounters Wen Tianren. When Tianren's time has come. Continuing from last time, Han Li discovers that refining the arrival vestment actually requires the spirit core of a transformation stage demon beast as the main material. Therefore, he feels that the materials for refining the arrival vestment are somewhat outrageous. However, because Han Li possesses the poison glue Pai Han, he has a chance of successfully refining it. After resting for a night, Han Li and Mei Ning leave the village. Han Li then takes Mei Ning to the nearest village. He thinks that if Mei Ning's brother is still alive, he must have also gone to another village. He plans to find him and take him to Stormwind Mountain. In Red Earth Village, Han Li and Mei Ning find Mei Ning's brother's belongings. It turns out that Mei Ning's brother, shortly after entering the desolate Yin land, was eaten by Yin beasts. The people of Red Earth Village buried his remains on the spot, and his belongings were placed in the village warehouse. Now that he has learned what happened to Mei Ning's brother, Han Li goes to hunt Yin beasts and collect desolate Yin beast essences. Goo cultivators use desolate Yin beast essences to create puppets, indicating that they are indeed useful. These essences are unique to the desolate Yin land and may not be found elsewhere. Most importantly, Pai Han is the natural enemy of Yin beasts. It can easily devour their souls. Han Li only needs to cut open the Yin beast's skull to see if there's an essence inside. After absorbing a large amount of Yin beast essences, Pai Han suddenly gains the ability to transform into a Ju Yuan. Its fur also gradually turns silver-white. This greatly surprises Han Li. According to the original Pai Han beast cultivation method provided by Yuan Yao, a true Pai Han beast doesn't have this ability. Moreover, after advancing, its fur should be jet black. However, this beast is only a semi-finished product, its refinement not yet complete. The Yin beast essences of the desolate Yin land seem to be quite special. Perhaps it's due to these two factors that this unique advancement has occurred. Han Li wants Pai Han to continue evolving this way. After all, the true refinement method is too bloody. Even though Han Li isn't a saint, he doesn't want to continue refining it using that method. He has obtained over 100 desolate Yin beast essences. However, time is limited. They must reach the summit of Stormwind Mountain before the next fissure opens. Therefore, Han Li has Pai Han transform into a Ju Yuan for travel. He and Mei Ning stand on its shoulders. Soon, they arrive at a towering mountain in the northeast corner of the desolate Yin land. From afar, only half of the mountainside is visible, the rest pierces the clouds. The mountain is entirely composed of bare black rock. No vegetation can survive on it. From a height of about 3,000 feet, fierce Yin winds begin to blow across the mountain. Ordinary people who step into them could be turned into black ice sculptures. The area around the mountain is even more gloomy and terrifying than other places. Lightning flashes in the sky, thunder rumbles incessantly, and icy winds howl on the ground. Flying sand and rocks make it feel like stepping into the underworld. Because the desolate yin qi is extremely dense here, several extremely powerful yin beasts dwell in this area. Of course, to Pai Han, they are merely delicious food. After ordering Pai Han to eliminate these yin beasts, Han Li recalls it into his sleeve. Pai Han begins to sleep soundly. Because the people here understand the general pattern of the fissure opening, Han Li learns this from them. The fissure will tear open again in about half a month. If they miss this opportunity, they might have to wait another 6 months. Han Li and Mei Ning easily climb to a height of 3,000 feet. But beyond that point, bitterly cold yin winds appear on the mountain. As the altitude increases, the wind gradually intensifies. Han Li and Mei Ning put on several layers of living attribute demon beast hide garments. But even so, their faces turn pale and their skin stings. Han Li takes out a wind-repelling pearl from his bosom. The pearl emits a faint fluorescent light, enveloping them within its glow. Please give us a like and subscribe, fellow Taoists. Let's continue our chat in the next episode. A Mortal's Journey to Immortality episode 144. Han Li never expected that after escaping the bright light land, they would appear in the boundless sea in the southern part of the sky. Previously on, Han Li killed Wen Tianren and encountered Fairy Zilin. Zilin, looking at Wen Tianren's corpse, exclaimed in surprise, "I never thought that young Master Wen, who always claimed to be the #1 core formation cultivator, would die at the hands of fellow Taoist in this way. If others were to know about this, I'm afraid most of them wouldn't believe it." Han Li calmly replied, "He shouldn't have appeared here at this time in the first place. Since he bumped into me, I naturally wouldn't let him go." He walked to the corpse and retrieved the storage pouch from its waist. He then examined the belt around Wen Tianren's waist. Zilin smiled subtly and explained, "That's the 4-element dragon plate belt. It's inlaid with wind-repelling, fire-repelling, water-repelling, and dust-repelling pearls. It also has the miraculous effect of calming the mind and soul. It's a rare treasure." She added, "He relied entirely on this belt to climb all the way here unimpeded." Han Li hesitated for a moment, but ultimately took the belt. He then checked Wen Tianren's body again, obtaining a turquoise inner armor and a few other treasures. Zilin looked at Mei Ning and inquired, "Brother Han, who is this fellow Taoist?" Han Li briefly introduced Mei Ning to her, and the two women exchanged greetings. Zilin wanted to explain what had happened earlier, but Han Li understood her predicament. He knew that Zilin hadn't chosen to attack Yuan Yao, so the matter was dropped. Zilin expressed her desire to travel with Han Li, and he agreed. Meanwhile, in a stone cave in Bright Light Land, Yuan Yao sat cross-legged, facing Yan Li's slender ghost shadow. Yuan Yao had previously cast the soul returning technique, but her gold core had shattered, nearly severing her path to further cultivation. Unexpectedly, she encountered a ghost, which interrupted the soul returning technique. Yan Li's soul had solidified considerably, but she could no longer regain a physical body. Bright Light Land possessed rich yin energy, which was greatly beneficial to Yan Li's ghost cultivation. Therefore, Yuan Yao planned to cultivate the yin-yang reincarnation Ju with Yan Li. This cultivation technique belonged to the young master of the Qingyang sect and was a rare technique for human-ghost dual cultivation. Cultivating this technique in Bright Light Land would not only allow Yan Li to cultivate rapidly, but it might also allow Yuan Yao to return to the core formation stage and perhaps even form a nascent soul. It wasn't impossible. However, once the technique reached a certain level of mastery, Yuan Yao would lose her eligibility to cultivate the reincarnation path. Therefore, Yan Li advised her to think it over carefully. After all, the Qingyang sect had possessed this technique for a long time, yet no one had ever cultivated it. Yuan Yao made up her mind and decided to cultivate the technique. Seeing this, Yan Li began cultivating the yin-yang reincarnation Ju with her. Near the flat summit of Stormwind Mountain, on a giant, flat rock, a silver giant ape over 10 zhang tall beat its chest and roared at the sky. Hanli and the two women stood at its feet, gazing gravely upward. Over 1,000 various kinds of fleshy, scarlet beasts swarmed in the sky. The larger ones were 5 or 6 zhang long, while the smaller ones were only the size of a pond. Their appearances were hideous and extremely ferocious. They were afraid of the giant ape, formed by the soul-devouring beast, and dared not swoop down for the moment. However, they also showed no signs of leaving, creating a tense stalemate. Hanli's heart was heavy, as they could attack at any moment. They had just passed through the mist when they were discovered by these flying beasts. Hanli had no choice but to release the soul-devouring beast and have it transform into the giant ape. Although the soul-devouring beast countered beasts, the sheer number of them in the sky was overwhelming. The soul-devouring beast might not be able to handle so many at once. However, having come this far, he could only fight with all his might. He handed a small red puppet and a folded beast skin scroll to Zilin and Mei Ning, respectively. He then flicked his sleeve, releasing 10 small swords. Each sword was connected to one of Hanli's fingers by a thin beast tendon, resembling divine eagles. At that moment, the beasts in the sky finally lost their patience. The largest, a 3-handed beast. A strange laugh suddenly rang out. The dozen or so beasts nearest to Hanli and the others immediately flapped their powerful wings and swooped down. The battle had begun. The giant ape's nose twitched, and it snorted fiercely. A large swathe of fluorescent light poured from its enormous nostrils, instantly enveloping 8 or 9 of the beasts. Caught in the fluorescent light, these beasts shrieked miserably, stumbling and plummeting to the ground. However, 2 smaller beasts slipped through the net, dodging the giant ape's attack and lunging fiercely at Hanli, Zilin, and Mei Ning from both sides. The giant ape swatted one of the smaller beasts away with a casual punch. But the other, a vulture-like beast 5 or 6 feet large, seized the opportunity to rush above them, swinging its claws to attack. Hanli's index finger twitched nimbly and rapidly. 10 small swords shot out, transforming into a shimmering net of green sword light that met the beast head-on. The green bamboo cloud swallower swords, being extremely sharp, instantly sliced the vulture beast into pieces. Then, more than 20 vulture beasts swooped down from the sky from all directions, followed by other beasts eager to join the fray. Hanli's heart tightened. Without hesitation, he waved both hands, lengthening the beast tendons by several feet. The green sword light net appeared again, protecting the 3 of them. Fluorescent light flashed, and shrill screams filled the air. Later, at the height of the midday sun, a patch of the sea's surface churned violently. A black mist erupted from the seabed, spreading rapidly and reaching over 100 zhang in width in the blink of an eye. A clap of thunder sounded, and fluorescent light flickered within the mist. Dazzling silver light appeared above the black mist, revealing the faint outline of a bulky human figure with silver wings spread out behind it. The silver light flashed intensely a few more times and vanished, only to reappear at the edge of the black mist. It flashed wildly again and disappeared into the horizon, seemingly fleeing in panic. The sea surface fell silent, but the black mist continued to expand. 1,000 miles away from the black mist, the silver light dissipated, revealing Hanli, Zilin, and Mei Ning. Hanli held Zilin in one arm and Mei Ning in the other. Pressed close together, the 3 appeared intimate. Although surrounded by fragrant warmth, Hanli's expression remained unchanged. However, Zilin and Mei Ning's faces were flushed, looking delicate and charming. Hanli looked around and said with a relaxed expression, "All right, the ghostly mist can't reach this place." We finally got out of that ghostly place. He calmly released the 2 women, displaying a gentlemanly demeanor. Zilin and Mei Ning floated beside him, repeatedly expressing their gratitude. Days earlier, after several close calls, the 3 had finally relied on the soul-devouring beast's power to kill all the flying beasts and climb to the summit of Stormwind Mountain. While waiting for the spatial rift to open, the two women discovered a surprising compatibility and became sworn sisters. This surprised Hanli somewhat. After waiting for several days, a spatial rift over 10 zhang large appeared several hundred zhang above the mountain peak. A large amount of spiritual qi from the outside world surged in, instantly restoring their magical powers. Overjoyed, they immediately flew out. However, as they exited the rift, a tremendous force pulled at them, trying to drag them back into Bright Light Land. Fortunately, Hanli reacted quickly, unfurling his wind and thunder wings. With a few flickers, he grabbed both women and activated his lightning movement technique, instantly escaping the black mist and flying to their current location in a single breath. Hanli discovered the presence of Xianya beasts, unique sea creatures found only in the boundless sea of Tiannan. After more than 100 years, he had finally returned. After returning to Tiannan, what was the first thing Hanli did? Hanli never expected that Mei Ning would want to become someone's concubine, and that Zilin would quietly suggest he take both Mei Ning and her as concubines. Previously on Hanli, Mei Ning, and Zilin arrived in the boundless sea of Tiannan, located at the northern end of Tiannan. This sea is barren with few fish or shrimp, and even islands are rare. The three decided to fly south. As expected, they encountered no islands along the way, and the sea was lifeless, with only a few ferocious sea beasts and no demonic beasts in sight. The three got along well, chatting and laughing as they journeyed. Surrounded by the two beautiful women, Hanli felt his heart stir from time to time. However, upon reaching the boundless sea, he also remembered Nan Gongwan, with whom he shared a spiritual connection. He wondered how she was doing, and an inexplicable mix of loss, love, and annoyance arose within him, a feeling he couldn't quite explain. After 3 or 4 months of travel, they finally reached land, arriving in Min Prefecture in western Tiannan. Chatting softly in a private room, Hanli revealed his approximate background to the women, surprising them. However, Zilin and Mei Ning had already suspected something, having noticed his familiarity with the boundless sea, so they weren't overly shocked. Zilin playfully joked, "Since Brother Han is the local expert, you must treat us sisters well." She had reverted to the delicate appearance she had when Hanli first met her, concealing her alluring true form to avoid unwanted attention. But having seen her true face, Hanli still found her every expression captivating and extremely charming. Hanli handed the women 2 white jade slips containing translations of the Tiannan language and script, which he had prepared overnight. Zilin and Mei Ning readily accepted them. Hanli planned to inquire about the changes in Tiannan over the past 100 years and then find a secluded cave to cultivate. He sensed he was nearing the peak of late core formation and needed to prepare for his nascent soul tribulation. He asked Zilin and Mei Ning about their future plans. Zilin, having recently formed her core and with her cultivation still unstable, also planned to find a cave to consolidate her cultivation. Mei Ning, however, was only at the mid-foundation establishment stage and possessed limited aptitude. She felt her chances of forming a core were slim unless she found some extraordinary elixir. Her only other option was to become a concubine to a high-level cultivator, hoping dual cultivation might give her a chance to form a gold core. Zilin objected. Becoming a concubine would be too much of a grievance for Sister Mei. A concubine's status isn't much better than a cauldron. If you encounter a high-level cultivator with wicked intentions, they might exploit Sister Mei. That's too risky. Hanli frowned and remained silent. Mei Ning, hearing this, shyly bit her lip and looked dejected. Seeing Mei Ning's expression, Zilin said, "Even if Sister Mei wants to rely on dual cultivation and become a concubine, she should find someone familiar and trustworthy, like Brother Han. I think he is very reliable and wouldn't let Sister Mei suffer any grievances." Hanli was startled by these words and casually touched his nose. Mei Ning gasped softly and blushed deeply, looking alluring. She lowered her head, silently accepting Zeline's matchmaking. After all, Hanli was a cultivator about to form a nascent soul and not a cruel person. Becoming his concubine was a satisfactory and relieving prospect. A beautiful female cultivator like her would eventually need to rely on a powerful male cultivator for protection in the dangerous cultivation world. Alone and isolated, she was even more vulnerable. The atmosphere in the room became ambiguous. Seeing Hanli's silence, Zeline asked with a charming smile, "Brother Han, what do you think of my suggestion? With Sister Mei Ning's beauty, you wouldn't refuse such a good opportunity, would you?" Hanli frowned slightly and looked at the delicate and charming Mei Ning. She lowered her hand further, a faint blush spreading across her exposed snow-white wrist. She was incredibly moving, and it seemed she had indeed tacitly agreed to Zeline's words. Hanli calmly said, "With Miss Mei's beauty and character, being my concubine, let alone a dual cultivation partner for a high-level cultivator, would be a highly sought-after blessing. However, I am different from other cultivators. I have vowed to devote my life to pursuing immortality and will not be easily swayed by romantic feelings. Moreover, I am used to being alone and am often in dangerous situations. How am I qualified to take a concubine? Following me would not be beneficial for fellow Taoist. On the contrary, it would bring harm and entanglement." Mei Ning trembled slightly at these words, the blush on her face fading, replaced by a paleness. Zeline said with surprise, "Brother Han, these are just humble words. Leaving aside other things, with your late core formation cultivation, besides nascent soul old monsters, who could possibly threaten you? Moreover, you might successfully form your nascent soul soon, and then the world will be yours to command. Could you still not protect Sister Mei Ning?" She seemed quite dissatisfied that Hanli would reject such a beautiful woman. Hanli calmly replied, "Fellow Taoist Zeline, you should know that although I believe my cultivation is a step above cultivators of the same rank, the enemies I've provoked are all powerful individuals. Before reaching the nascent soul stage and truly possessing sufficient power, I will not consider such matters. Otherwise, I would be unable to protect her, and it would only lead to unnecessary heartache." Zeline frowned slightly, acknowledging the truth in Hanli's words. Moreover, she sensed his displeasure and sighed, dropping the subject. Mei Ning looked at Hanli and unexpectedly asked, "Since Brother Han doesn't find my appearance crude, would you be willing to accept Mei Ning after reaching the nascent soul stage?" Hanli glanced at her indifferently and said, "Whether I can reach the nascent soul stage is uncertain. And even if I do, it's still unknown how many years it will take. Is Miss Mei truly willing to wait indefinitely? Perhaps after 100 years, I still might not have advanced." Hearing this, Mei Ning's expression flickered uncertainly, and she fell silent. With her foundation establishment lifespan, even 20 or 30 years, let alone 100, was too long to wait for an uncertain outcome. Although he was a good candidate for dual cultivation, she couldn't truly waste so much time. The cultivation world was realistic and cruel. Although she had some feelings for Hanli, complete, unwavering devotion was impossible. Seeing the melancholy on Mei Ning's face, Hanli sighed and took out 2 bottles of pills. He said slowly, "These contain cultivation-enhancing pills refined from demon cores. Instead of thinking about improving your cultivation through dual cultivation, Miss Mei, it's better to focus on diligent cultivation. Perhaps, like fellow Taoist Zeline, you might form your gold core on your own." These foundation establishment pills were useless to Hanli, but considering Mei Ning's past favor of imparting the art of spirit communication, he offered them as a gesture of goodwill, settling his debt to her. Mei Ning's expression softened, and she subconsciously picked up a bottle. Opening it, she saw they were indeed top-grade pills. Clutching the jade bottle, she gazed intently at Hanli. He had been attracted to her in Bright Light Land, even making advances, yet now he refused her as a concubine but gave her these precious pills. She was confused. "Zeline, Knowing the pills were invaluable to Mei Ning, though insignificant to Han Li, advised her to accept them. Perhaps with these and more spirit herbs, Mei Ning could reach the core formation stage. Mei Ning's face was filled with complex emotions. After looking deeply at Han Li, she thanked him softly and put the pills away. Seeing this, a faint smile appeared on Han Li's face. He then bid farewell to the two women and departed. Realizing the pills he had were no longer effective for his cultivation, Han Li decided to infiltrate a sect and utilize their spirit veins to cultivate. Please give us a like and subscribe, fellow Taoists. Let's continue our chat in the next episode. A Mortal's Journey to Immortality Episode 145. Han Li never expected that the spiritual medicine in his hand would be ineffective for him. He prepared to infiltrate the Luo Yun sect to use their spiritual veins for cultivation. Continuing from last time, Han Li discovered that taking pills could no longer improve his cultivation. He felt that perhaps his body had developed a resistance to the medicine. It could also be because of the Bai Yan wine and the spirit connective qi. After all, one of these two things was not originally meant for human consumption, and the other was one of the so-called 7 great spiritual energy essences in the world. Some unexpected side effects seemed quite normal. Since things had come to this, Han Li no longer dwelled on the matter. Although he still had a level 8 poisonous Jiao's demon core, this item was extremely precious, and he couldn't bear to refine it into pills. Pill refinement also had a high chance of failure. Even if he managed to refine 1 or 2, it wouldn't allow him to reach the false nascent soul stage. In this way, like ordinary cultivators, he could only rely on his own arduous cultivation to improve his cultivation level bit by bit. Fortunately, he was now only a little away from the great perfection stage. If he cultivated in a place with abundant spiritual energy, it would only take him a little over 10 years to complete. So, he needed to find a place with good spiritual veins to cultivate. Otherwise, cultivating in a place with scarce spiritual energy would multiply the time needed. However, Tianan had a large population, and its land area was not large. The vast majority of spiritual veins were occupied by large and small sects and cultivator families. Even if there were some overlooked places with poor spiritual energy, they were swarmed and occupied by rogue cultivators. There was simply no such thing as a leftover place. Thus, if Han Li wanted to continue cultivating, he could only infiltrate a cultivator family or some cultivation sect. He didn't plan to forcibly seize a place with spiritual veins, afraid of being targeted by nascent soul old monsters. The spiritual veins of cultivator families were not very good, and it was very difficult for outsiders to infiltrate them. But cultivation sects were different, especially those larger cultivation sections. Not only were the spiritual veins they occupied the best, but there were also many high-level cultivators within the sect. If trouble arose, he wouldn't need to step forward and expose his cultivation level, thus delaying his own cultivation. After all, it's good to enjoy the shade under a big tree. Once he condensed his nascent soul, he would naturally have nothing more to fear. Even if he was exposed, the upper echelons of the sect would only try every means to win him over, not be foolishly arrogant or hostile towards him. So, Han Li planned to find a sect with the most abundant spiritual energy. Throughout all of Tianan, the famous sacred spiritual vein, Cloud Dream Mountain, became Han Li's first choice for cultivation. Cloud Dream Mountain was located in Nanzhou of Shi country. Nanzhou had complex terrain with countless hills and dense forests. Swamps and miasma also frequently appeared. It was rich in some rare medicinal herbs and spirit beasts. Among them, Cloud Dream Mountain was a very famous sacred spiritual vein. Deep within this mountain range grew a legendary spirit eye tree, which was also the last of the 3 great divine eyes in the cultivation world. Every 200 years, the roots of this tree would secrete a spiritual liquid called pure leaf. Although this liquid could not be consumed directly, it was an excellent raw material for refining several spiritual medicines. A legendary sacred medicine, the spirit-stabilizing pill, required this spiritual liquid as a medicinal catalyst. The spirit-stabilizing pill was also called the soul-soothing pill. It could not only enhance a cultivator's cultivation level, but also calm the mind and soothe the soul, reducing the invasion of a cultivator's inner demons. If one took a pill beforehand when condensing the nascent soul, it would definitely make it much easier for a cultivator to condense their nascent soul, because condensing the nascent soul required enduring certain illusions and harassment from inner demons. After all, the process of transforming the core into a nascent soul was originally a terrible journey to temper a cultivator's mind and concentration. At this time, Cloud Dream Mountain was jointly occupied by the Ancient Sword Sect, the Luoyun Sect, and the 100 Skills Pavilion. So, Hanli wanted to join one of these sections. He naturally needed to compare the characteristics of the three sects, their pros and cons. Speaking of which, one cannot fail to mention the Tian and cultivation world's general situation over the past 100 years. Present-day Tianan no longer had the situation where powers, large and small, coexisted with countries as boundaries. The entirety of Tian only had the demonic path, the righteous path's Heavenly Tao Alliance, and the Nine Nations Alliance. Hanli was already aware of the righteous and demonic paths and the Nine Nations Alliance. The Heavenly Tao Alliance, a vast organization that only emerged after he went to the Scattered Star Seas, was an alliance of cultivator sects jointly formed by over a dozen large and small countries to counter the righteous and demonic paths. In terms of power, it was stronger than either the righteous or demonic path alone, but it would be no match for them if the righteous and demonic paths joined forces. However, the righteous and demonic sides had always been hostile to each other, making any talk of an alliance impossible. The Heavenly Tao Alliance itself was also just a rather loose alliance and would not proactively attack the righteous or demonic paths. The reason why no major wars had occurred again for over 100 years was related to the Nine Nations Alliance. Besides absorbing the 7 sects of Yu country, the Nine Nations Alliance also absorbed many other cultivator sects and rogue cultivators expelled by the righteous and demonic paths. Although its strength greatly increased, it had to face the invasion of the Mulan tribe. Later, when the Mulan tribe's second and fourth largest tribes also joined the war, the conflict between the two sides grew even more intense. In several major battles, both sides suffered heavy casualties. The Nine Nations Alliance was at a disadvantage, even losing some territory. Out of desperation, the Nine Nations Alliance was forced to seek aid from the righteous, demonic, and Heavenly Tao alliances, threatening the 3 powers that they would completely let the Mulan tribe through if they were unwilling to send troops. The righteous and demonic paths and the Heavenly Tao Alliance had no choice but to send some reinforcements. Only then was the Nine Nations Alliance barely able to withstand the Mulan people's offensive, finally regaining its footing. However, from then on, the Nine Nations Alliance demanded that the other powers must send people to jointly resist the spellcasters' offensive. After a long period of negotiation and wrangling, the 4 major powers reached an agreement, with the Nine Nations Alliance as the main force and the other 3 as support. They would jointly resist the Mulan people. Because of this, the righteous and demonic paths dared not easily restart hostilities. Shi country, along with 2 neighboring countries, belonged to the Heavenly Tao Alliance, and the Ancient Sword Sect, Luoyun Sect, and Bai Qiao Pavilion were its core sections. Among these 3 sects, Hanli first considered the Bai Qiao Pavilion. The Bai Qiao Pavilion was famous in the cultivation world for refining magical artifacts, and the sect also possessed several rumored refinement methods for top-tier magic treasures. But unfortunately, this sect was controlled by the 5 most powerful cultivator families. It recruited disciples from various cultivation families and rarely recruited externally. This sect occupied a mountain range in the western part of Yunming Mountain. The Ancient Sword Sect was highly proficient in sword kinesis arts. Its signature ultimate technique, the Tai Bai sword art, was extremely famous in Shi country and incomparably potent. This sect's cultivation methods and sword arts had very high requirements for aptitude. Basically, those with slightly inferior spiritual roots would find it impossible to cultivate its various techniques. Therefore, it had the fewest disciples among the three sections. However, sword cultivators possessed exceedingly strong offensive power, and cultivators of the same rank were often not their match. So, it was the most powerful of the three sects, occupying the main mountain range of Yunming Mountain. As for the Luoyun sect, its cultivation methods were diverse, but not specialized. It enjoyed considerable fame in the art of pill refinement. In Shi country, only this sect had the ability to successfully refine the rumored spirit-stabilizing pill. So, although its sect strength was significantly inferior to the other two sects, the Luoyun sect still managed to establish a foothold in the eastern part of Yunming Mountain. The Luoyun sect recruited the most disciples among the three sects and had the lowest entry threshold. This sect had only two conditions for recruiting disciples. Either one's spiritual root aptitude was good, showing potential for cultivation, or one's cultivation already had a certain foundation, such as having cultivated basic techniques to a higher level. Then, even if one's spiritual roots were poor, they would still be accepted. After all, the Luoyun sect also dabbled in talismans, formations, and other miscellaneous skills, all of which had some involvement. These all required a large number of low-level disciples to manage in order to continue functioning. Hanli, who possessed pseudo-spiritual roots, could only choose to infiltrate the Luoyun sect. He planned to disguise himself as a 7th-layer qi condensation cultivator and infiltrate it. With his current cultivation level and the miraculous nature of that nameless breath-concealing art, no one else could possibly see through his true cultivation level, apart from cultivators at mid-nascent soul stage or above scrutinizing him carefully. Half a month later, when the Luoyun sect recruited disciples again, Hanli disguised himself as a cultivator at the 7th layer of qi condensation and participated in the assessment. In Hanli's world, Mupealing is about to appear. Please give us a like and subscribe, fellow Taoists. Let's continue our chat in the next episode.